Hi, this is Marlon Weems, a journeyman, and coming to you live with a special guest. And I'm really excited about this. I'm going to be spending a few minutes with Kelle Rozell, who, who I only knew until recently as um, the black index, so the black dollar index. I was like, who's behind this thing? Who's doing this? And so I had to reach out, and fortunately for all of us, she accepted my invite. So we're going to talk a little bit about what she's doing, the strategy, and just kind of dig into a little bit of data. So I'm looking forward to it. Maybe Kelle, maybe where we can start is by just from the beginning. Where'd you come from, and how did you get involved in this? What made you start this?
Yeah, well, I'm originally from Cleveland, Ohio. And if you know anything about the Midwest, it's one of the most segregated places in the country. I'm mixed, so I was exposed to both very disparate sides of.
Catching it from both ways, huh?
Yeah, so, I grew up in diverse suburbs. I grew up in all white areas. I grew up in all black, like I went to all black high school, went to all white middle school. So, I think like that was kind of the starting point for understanding like all right, things are not equal. I went on to move to New York. I worked in the entertainment industry for some years. Spent some time in music, went into television marketing. My last network job was ABC News. So that was during 2020. So I was there, like business was booming. There was no shortage of news. June or May, George Floyd is murdered by the police. I pull a group together. Let's find our own way. There were a lot of black squares, and we were like, there has to be another way to hold these corporations accountable. A lot of my peers that were interested were in similar situations where they were working in these big corporations. So we dug through ESG reports and diversity reports and pulled everything that these corporations were doing specifically for Black people, not what they said they were going to do, but what they reported they had done.
Hmm.
Um, did that for 105 companies, and we gave a tangible number that consumers could like quickly understand. Like this company has 100, this company has a 0, this has a 50, color coding, here's what it means. And it gives us kind of a guide and a digestible way to understand like what the full picture of what corporations are doing, not just one little piece, but really like contextualizing it into something that consumers can understand.
That's interesting. So, and now, was this when you were at ABC that this happened?
Yeah, I kind of did it on the low. They didn't know.
I was going to say because I don't remember seeing that.
No, I mean, this was because it was very independent, but we launched in Black History Month of 2021. Um,
Okay.
I was kind of like, let me try to stay as low as possible. We came out, we had a USA Today exclusive in digital and print. And like, I was doing interviews with like Bloomberg, Quick Take, and Yahoo.
Okay.
Meanwhile, I'm praying that Good Morning America does not see this because I'm like, I do not need to be, put on blast by my employer. But eventually I
Okay.
have to tell them.
Okay. So, um, what caught my eye? Well, there are a few things, and I try to, what I try to do with what we're doing right now, and just to sort of give a little background. I've been on Substack. I started my newsletter around the same time frame that you're talking about, 2020 ish,
Okay.
and so I was here before notes, before the streaming, before all of that. So I've kind of grown my offering, if you will, as these different things have come along because I really started notes to get away from Twitter.
Mm,
That's when I jumped on notes. One of the things that I noticed is how you've sort of dug into just the whole DEI conversation,
yeah.
and I would like to hear. I have people who say to me, yeah, but it wasn't working anyway, and blah, blah, So, I mean, and this is a lot of black folks. That's sort of the take that I get. Um, I don't, I don't personally think I ever, except maybe college. I was recruited hard by the University of Arkansas Unfortunately for them and me, I wasn't really a good student, but they did. I wouldn't have gone to college perhaps if they had not aggressively lobbied me and a bunch of black seniors in my high school. But other than that, most of what I've done has really, I sort of bumped into the career that I spent 30 years in, and really DEI didn't have a whole lot to do with any of it. Um, Except on the back end, I worked for minority owned firms in New York. So they certainly would have benefited in that way. But even then, most of my clients were more concerned with performance than what you look like. Um, so I've always had that kind of an odd, I don't know, perspective or maybe not a perspective on DEI. Um, do you think it? Do you think it works? Do you think after after it's been decimated, now what? Do we just call
So
it something else and just do it anyway?
And so my whole thing is, again, follow the data. And these companies, some of them are more transparent. We'll see what happens in this new climate, like whether they'll continue to post EEO1 reports and continue to post what they're doing. I think a lot of this has to be baked into the corporate values. I look at DEI as, I mean, I think the three letters, it's semantics. We can
Mm-hmm.
whatever we want. I'm really more interested in the policies and the practices and the progress that's made behind those three letters. And that's what I think we will find if we follow the data. So I've been really about, yes, I'm tracking what's happening with DEI. Prior to, let's go back to June 2023, I actually spent a year and a half in racial justice at Color of Change leading marketing.
Okay.
So at the time, I was a part of layoffs, but on the way out, affirmative action had just been struck down. And we knew that that was going to trickle into the private sector. So by October of 2023, I think it was, my timeline is all off these days, but I was looking up racial discrimination claims for corporations, and I was starting to see white men suing corporations
Oh
for
yeah.
discrimination. And I saw this trend, and I'm like, wait a minute, like America First Legal, DEI is under attack. So let me just like say that loudly, guys, DEI is under attack. Now, what that meant was the Fearless Fund and some of these programs that work with HBCUs was under attack. So I knew that there were going to be real implications to DEI being under attack. What I will say, what I'm seeing, what's happening right now is there's a lot of uh, reactiveness around DEI, and like this company changed its DEI policy, or this company did this company is keeping DEI, so we're going to support this company got rid of DEI. That is where I will caution people, and that's where I continue to stand behind and say that let's follow the data. There are companies that will ride for DEI till the wheels fall off, but if you dig in, they have not done anything impactful for Black people, and I will never uplift those companies. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there are companies that are getting rid of DEI or changing language that sounds, really disheartening. But if you look at the numbers and everything they've done for years upon years, that tells me that they're probably going to keep doing these things and they're going to call it something different, but it's baked into the company's values.
Mm-hmm.
That's just who they are. A company like Pepsi, I think it's really interesting. I know that Reverend Al Sharpton is calling a boycott. It's been paused for 21 days. They're going to have a meeting with the head of Pepsi to talk through this. I believe the head of Pepsi is a Hispanic man. I know that Pepsi North America, there's a Black CEO. I believe that it's probably firmly baked into the values and the culture. They just have to call it something different. JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, another one, he is firmly stood on this idea of DEI. Now, are they doing it perfectly? Maybe not, but I know that the leadership is invested. And they said, okay, fine, we'll change the name from DEI. It's now going to be diversity, opportunity, and inclusion, because we're not guaranteeing everybody gets an equal outcome, but we can guarantee everybody will get, the same
A
opportunity.
chance.
So I think for me, again, DEI is semantics. We have to look past like this concept of a company keeping or getting rid of DEI and really look at the progress that's made behind it. And I do that through looking at what they report out every year. I do that
Hmm.
looking at what's happening like when I search racial discrimination claims for that company. So then when I put it all together, like I can present it to consumers and then we can see what the real work is and like the viability that they'll just completely abandon certain things. Now, I think if there's one thing that they're going to abandon, it's probably a little bit of the transparency, unfortunately.
Mm. So I guess, can't really have this conversation without talking about Target. Um,
Oh, Lord.
now, now, so I had a chance to see it. I'm trying to remember the pastor's name that I
Jamal,
saw this
Jamal
YouTube
Bryant.
where I'm sorry.
Pastor Jamal Bryant.
Yes, yes, thank you. So there's this 40-day pause, I guess, or
Yeah.
fast on Target, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the um, maybe the beef goes back to George Floyd and some commitments that were made, and
Yeah.
essentially by them, sort of canceling out of DEI, they were reneging on, the promise that they had made to do X amount of business, or, whatever. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was one of the people that was hurt by, the Target thing. I did a mini report and you can find it on the Black Dollar Index account. So basically, Target put together this internal council. They came up with a set of goals that they were going to focus on. From, let's see, they had a 5-year shift. So in 2020, like talking about DEI and equity and all of these things was all the rage. And then when you look at where they are now, you can see that it slowly started to dwindle down. And now we had this like announcement that DEI changes were being made. One of the changes, they have 4 racial equity action and change committee pillars. One was around team, building this inclusive work environment for Black team members. One was for guests, creating an inclusive guest environment for Black Americans. One was for communities, supporting Black communities. And the fourth was public policy and civic engagement. That was convening partners to impact civic discussions. So I went back and looked at every report from 2020 through 2023 or 24, whatever the most recent was, to see what they actually accomplished. I feel like the announcement they made was abrupt. There was no real clarity on like what had been done or had not been done. So I just wanted to, because I feel like we were all just reacting and didn't really have an idea of like what Target actually accomplished.
Hmm.
So, their reported actions, they made these high level commitments, increased representation of Black team members across the Target team by 20% from 21 to 23, 2021 to 2023.
My
And
wife is making a cameo appearance. Our cats are
hey,
just having like a complete meltdown.
and
Every time I get online, I think they get mad.
I heard a little kitten or something.
Yeah.
Um, So what I found was that they actually like didn't really increase much. So
Hmm.
Target's Black workforce essentially remained flat, or really in 2020, 15% of Target's workforce was Black. By 2021, 16% was Black. By 2023, 15% were Black.
Really?
So they did not have that overall 20% increase
Huh.
that they wanted. Now, what I will say is that 13.7% of the population is Black. So, as far as I'm concerned, if you want to look at it, Target actually did over index when it
So
comes.
they were reflective, like you say, they
Yeah,
were overweighted, so to speak. To use financial terms, maybe.
yeah. Now, what I will say is their Hispanic representation grew like 24% over that time.
Okay.
Um, so then when you dig into the actual workforce representation and the levels, again, you start to see like they remain flat across total workforce and non-managers. Black managers did increase by 8%, and Black leadership dropped by 25%. So, you know, it was a mixed bag, and I don't know who was responsible or why, but like,
Sure.
like they made a goal. That one they did not succeed. When it comes to guests, they made that $2 billion commitment where they would spend $2 billion with Black-owned businesses by the end of 2025. They reported that they partnered with over 150 clients. They had this accelerator and incubator program that supported over 50 companies. They did this thing with Revolt where they gave 500,000 in funding for startups in partnership with their Bet on Black program. Um, some of the information they reported back on was very vague. You supported over 50 companies. We don't know who the companies are. That was just 2020. There was no further reporting. So it just felt very vague. And in 2022, I think they said they were on target to hit their $2 billion commitment, but then
Hmm.
no other reporting since then. So it's like, did this was supposed to go through 2025. So
Right.
my question was, okay, we're still holding the line. Like, what are you going to tell us at the end of 2025 or in this recent report? Like, is there going to be another report that says we actually did fulfill this?
Hmm.
Like, what is happening there? So I don't think that that goal was accomplished. When it comes to communities, they committed 100 million through 2025 to help fuel economic prosperity in Black communities. They invested 10 million to support a bunch of different partners: National Urban League, African American Leadership Forum. They gave some money to HBCUs, but there's no kind of tracking of 100 million.
Hmm.
It's like we
So
did it.
you can't really get granular with it.
Right. And
So
if
so
you
do
look
you
at,
think? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
just really quick, like there are other companies that do get granular. And that's what I think, the transparency is so important because it's like you can say you're doing a thing and it sounds
Hmm.
great, but like how do we know the thing was done? So
Hmm.
JP Morgan Chase will actually lay out like this is what we spent on these things. I mean, you can go to a lot of the banks and find like their foundation list, like they are telling you what organizations and who they spent what they spent with them.
Mm. So with Target, what do you think? Do you think they? It seems to me almost like just hearing what you said. Maybe they knew they weren't going to make the target anyway,
So
and they just said, well, why not?
it's funny because the mini study, I think the name I gave it was like the headline was, did Target introduce us to a vibe they could not maintain?
Mm.
And it seems like it got to that point. Now, is there another way they could have done this? I think so. I think
I
that
mean, because boy, they got a reaction that I'm sure wasn't the one that
they
they
did,
wanted.
and they haven't said anything until this uh Al Sharpton boycott of PepsiCo, and PepsiCo saying we'll talk to you. So now there's all of a sudden like news like Target is going to talk to Al Sharpton. Now, my whole thought is like, at this point, it almost feels like any company that backtracked on DEI and now like we're protesting, what are we expecting? Oh,
Hmm.
here, damn, like here's your DEI. And now are we satisfied or do we still have to follow the data to wait and see what they've actually done?
Well, because they've already fooled us once.
Yeah. So I'm not here to trust any company that's just leveraging the idea of DEI. And like
Hmm.
the point of like, but I do think there's a very interesting case study of the market share shifting from Target to Costco and Costco being the hero, there are some things I think Costco does really well. Costco invested over 70 million in a lot of um, capital investment funds for Black entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
Um, so and they do the philanthropy, the donations and the charity. But like if you look at their workforce, it's not the most diverse. Like they don't have the most Black employees at every level.
Okay.
It's like, so again, it's looking at the full picture, but also saying like, do we like Costco? I like that they gave 70 million to Black entrepreneurs because not a lot of people are doing that, you know? So it's taking all the information and then making an informed decision. How do I feel about what this company did or didn't do?
Hmm.
And
You
now,
know, on that point, we were, before we went live, um, we were talking about Target, and I was telling you, I don't. There's not a Target within 25 miles of me, so it's easy for me to avoid Target. But my daughter, who lives in Wilmington, loves Target,
mhm,
and I'm telling her, hey, I'm working on her with Target, but then on the other hand, there's Chick-fil-A. And so I thought that was interesting because in my head, I like Chick-fil-A's food, but I don't like Chick-fil-A's politics. Can you talk a little bit about just, you shared something really interesting with me, and I think maybe it kind of enlightened me a little
yeah.
bit.
So again, I think we have to look at the big picture. So when I dig in to Chick-fil-A, I will say they've been more transparent than they had been 2020, By 2023, 2024, they're sharing more. They're not transparent about their workforce. So I don't know how many Black people work at Chick-fil-A. They're not transparent with their supplier diversity spend. So I don't know how much money they've given to Black suppliers. But what they are slightly transparent about is some of their community investments. And they are out of the Atlanta area, which is like 46% Black. So one, when you think of like corporate headquarters that are in cities like that, you
Hmm.
imagine that one, they're supporting their community. So
Sure.
disproportionately, in a positive way, Black people are impacted. Um, they are working with Morris Brown College, which the only historically Black college to launch an on-campus hospitality management training program
Hmm.
committed preparing Black and Brown people to own and operate restaurants and hotels. So they gave a $1 million gift for a leadership development program that will give students access to opportunities and tools to help them advance their skills, network, and prepare for success in their journey. So I thought that that was great. They're working with HBCUs. In 2023, they committed to the following Atlanta area organizations: 1.5 million to the Atlanta Community Food Bank, 1 million to the Boys and Girls Clubs of Metro Atlanta, 4.5 million to City of Refuge, 1 million to Clark Atlanta, 5 million to the West Side Future Fund. Again, some of it is directly Black, like Clark Atlanta. Some of it is disproportionately Black because we're talking about a city like Atlanta that has a high population of Black people. Um, they gave out like a $50,000 scholarship to a team member in Wilson, North Carolina. But then you have these stories where they're giving out scholarships and, the Black team member gets 1,000 and everybody else gets 2,500 or whatever. So like none of these corporations are perfect, but if we kind of layer this methodology on to analyze that and say, okay, here's an individual issue, here's a systemic issue, this impacted a whole community, this impacted one employee, this impacted the whole company. Like how do we start to like weigh what the levels of impact are when these things pop up versus taking one thing and like just blowing it all up and canceling the whole company. And that's what I aim to do, is create a full picture for consumers to like quickly understand not just one little piece of the puzzle, but what the company, like how do we assess them as a whole.
Hmm. So I saw you had I guess this is the index, maybe a top 10 companies and how they rank. And I was kind of surprised that I think Stellantis was at the top of the list that I saw.
Yeah, I
Uh,
feel like
what's the story with that?
so I feel like that latest piece of content that I put out was a little controversial. There were a lot of people that were skeptical or wanted to dig in and say, well, what about how much they pay people? I am not disputing any of that. I am not saying that these companies are amazing. I'm not saying that they don't have labor issues.
Hmm.
They're
That's
Amazon
a different conversation, though.
unionizing. This is strictly looking at the facts of like who is hiring black people. And I broke down what levels they hire them at and did a little bit of deeper dive into like some anecdotal things. So Stellantis, I believe, is out of Detroit, another predominantly black city.
Hmm.
So, a lot of it is probably the laborers, the operatives, the skilled and non-skilled workers. So it's no surprise that they have this large body of black employees. I think it was like 36 something percent.
Yeah, it was. I
I
mean, I don't remember who was second, but there was quite. I mean, there was a
it
fairly
was
distant second.
Yeah, well, let me pull that one up really quick. But yeah, so I think some of it depends on where the company is,
Hmm.
and what that city that they reside in. They also got a reward or an award for like black executives. So from what I saw, their leadership team is 3.3%. They're not transparent publicly about the rest of their workforce, like the rest of the levels.
Hmm.
It makes me think they share data with some organization that deemed that they had a really diverse executive um, composition and they received an award for it. So I want to focus on what companies are transparent with consumers about. Um, I think we're going to see a lot of those surveys going away. That was a part of the big thing with DEI changes. You're going to see
Hmm.
like in a lot of those DEI changes, they're getting rid of reporting to the Corporate Equality Index, which is the human rights campaign for LGBTQ plus.
Okay.
So HRC would go to these corporations with a survey. Corporations would fill out the survey, and then HRC would give them a score on this index. Everything that I've done to date has been based on what they've already decided to transparently report to their shareholders through their ESG reports or diversity reports, and sometimes in their 10K reports. Um, so there's a lot of hidden.
So, are you saying you think that type of reporting is going to go away?
I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's just gonna be that it's gonna go away for the LGBTQ plus community, but I imagine it's going to impact every community. I think we're gonna start. I mean, I'm already starting to see. Oh, a link that I had, a report that I already went through. When I go to revisit it, 404 error.
Mm.
Oh, that's
Wow.
gone. But kind of tip that somebody gave me is go to Wayback Machine and some
Yeah.
and still find.
Yeah. The
So
internet never it never dies.
yeah,
So,
so I'm still pulling from that and saying, this was what was done. They deleted it. That's a signal to me though, and something
hmm.
to also consider. But we'll keep monitoring. General Mills is another one that they deleted their report, but there's a consumer boycott that's set to happen starting Monday for the week. And, I just felt like there were things that we needed to know as a community because we're getting caught in all these boycotts. And I don't even think we know why we're boycotting some of these things anymore. But yeah, so I pulled
So,
up.
so I want to talk about boycotts, but I have to ask you about. I noticed Amazon was in that top 10, maybe towards like middle of the, you
Yep,
know,
yep,
rankings, I guess.
yep. So Amazon, I mean, they have like over a million
I mean,
employees.
it was a huge number of black people, like a quarter of a million or something.
Yeah. So Amazon, pulling it up, Amazon specifically. So UPS was number two after, or no,
Oh, okay.
UPS was
That
not
kind
number.
of that doesn't surprise me.
No, FedEx was number two. Um,
Okay. And they're
Amazon,
headquartered in Memphis, right? FedEx.
FedEx, Memphis, yes.
Okay, so it kind of goes back to your theory, you know.
But they also have a really large distribution network. And I think
Hmm.
that's the same thing that's like happening with Amazon is like you have this company that has a bunch of warehouses everywhere. Now, again, we know that people are unionizing and
Hmm.
like there are strikes and labor issues, and people will, refer to it as modern day slavery. Um, but Amazon does hire 25.7% of their workforce, over 270,000 people out of over a million are Black. Now, when it comes to their like mid-level managers, 12.6% are Black. When it comes to executive or senior level managers, so maybe depending on how they define it, it could be directors, VPs, and up,
Hmm.
is 5.5%. And they don't have any Black people at their corporate leadership level. Um, they're doing a lot of things internally. I look at Amazon as one of those things like there are broader issues that impact everybody. And again, let's focus on Black people and what they're doing and not doing for Black people.
Hmm.
Black people are being impacted the same way white people and Asian people. And, when it comes to some things, I think we can all agree that, you know, people working in warehouses should be paid more, and like they should be able to go to the bathroom, or, like all of these.
Right.
But now when you're talking about nooses and you're talking about Black people disproportionately, if you're getting paid 10 and the Black person's getting paid 7 or 5, like now we have that's what I want to focus on.
Hmm.
Uh, but I mean, when it comes to the corporate level, they seem to be implementing some initiatives and programs to, advance their pipeline and make it more diverse. They were one of the companies that did back out on DEI. So again, let's see what happens. What are they going to report? And there's
It's so interesting. I was one of my brothers does a lot of contract work with the government, and so he's always writing grants and doing all. And he was telling me this is a couple of months ago that they were literally having to back out of grants just because of the new language. They had to kind of throw their presentations out and start over again because they were focused, they were coming at it from, sort of a DEI centric approach that now they can't do it. And so he was also telling me, and I won't say what university this is, but we have a friend that basically within the university ran their diversity department, and they had to get rid of it. But what they did was, as we were talking about earlier, instead of just firing her and shutting it down, they just moved her to a different department and started calling it something else. She's still doing pretty much the same thing, but
okay.
it's just now it's the red, white, and blue America department.
Yeah.
I mean, you can call it whatever. It's really what you do that that
Yeah.
sort of makes the difference.
And it's interesting because like there was this really wealthy white guy who I'm blanking on his name, but he made this very large endowment to a university to give scholarships to rural America.
Hmm. Mm.
And that's DEI. Like that's DEI.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate part of it, they actually did put Spellman into that. But I think that was like a here you go. Yeah, we checked that box. But
Hmm.
like, we know that like the conversation around rural America usually kind of leaves Black folks out, especially when you're talking about things like agriculture, like we had all these John Deere, the Tractor Co. White America or like stood up. Robbie Starbuck did this whole like Heartland America thing as if he was claiming it for white people and saying DEI didn't belong when like we know the history of Black farmers and like
Right.
so anyways, I say that to say like there's still this weird thing happening where this white man can give millions of dollars and make it go towards rural America, and they don't call that DEI.
That's interesting. So boycotts. I saw you wrote something and maybe asking the question about and I can't recall exactly how you positioned it, but are they worth it? Is it, what is it? It can't be. And I think people think about it this way, like we're going to do this boycott, and that's going to change everything. But then what? I think is the question you were asking.
Yeah.
What do you think should be the next thing?
So, I understand the role that boycotts have played and continue to play. And I think that we should. I think we're seeing what's happening when there's these Target boycotts. Like Target is now finally like broken, as Al Sharpton is saying, like you got to break them. Um, I think that the times are different. Like what we're
Sure.
boycotting is this like kind of somewhat intangible thing. I think there are tangible parts to it, but we have to track. We can't just say, "Okay, thank you Target for reinstating DEI. Now we can shop at Target again." We have to actually say like, "Okay, reinstate DEI and now we have to follow and make sure you're doing all of the things year over year." That's what I'm here to focus on is like
Hmm.
what happens after the boycott? What happens before the boycott? What happens during the boycott? What happens after the boycott? What does the data show? Are they still upholding their commitments? And maybe they don't have commitments, but it's like, let's focus on doing the right thing. Back during civil rights, it wasn't like we had products on shelves at Sears, or
Yeah.
we're fighting for jobs. We were fighting to be able to walk into the store. And now it's much more nuanced where we're fighting for space on shelves. We're fighting for space at the table on boards in C suites. Progress has been made. Like the civil rights movement moved us forward in that way where now we have opportunity that we didn't. But I think that we have to track it differently and use technology in a way that we weren't able to back then. So for me, it's really about building this like muscle. We have to build a muscle that like we look for information, but I don't expect consumers to dig through these reports. So how do we democratize the data? How do we make it more accessible, more digestible, and really like a consumer reports, like a green book, like what app is on your phone, what book is on your coffee table, something that you can refer to before you go shopping. Like, let me check this out. The same way you're going to look at for a coupon, like we need to be looking before we spend money and just make an informed decision. That's it.
Hmm. I guess that's where you come in, though, right?
Yes, that's the goal.
So, I mean, are you still generating? I know I've seen what you post on Substack, but are you doing like deep dive reports that are available? If somebody wants to, I don't know, pay you to do the work for a specific purpose, are you available for that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been talking to a couple of groups. Actually, there's a group out of Greensboro that's looking to do some work around their Black business community. I want to, it's hard. You got to find this balance, right? Like, I don't want Black people to have to pay for this information, but I can't do this for free. So, I do want to work with companies and who are trying to understand some of these business problems. But I also want to offer as much of it as a public benefit as possible. So the Target mini study, what some might not have put out on social media, like I want consumers to see that. So as much of it as possible, I am here to give and put on Substack. So sometimes I have a concept of a report and then I turn it into an article and then I turn it into Instagram graphics
Mm.
and turn it into something I can put on Spill. So I want to make this a benefit for as many people as possible, but I'm absolutely here to um work with these corporations, work with smaller businesses, work with individuals, organizations to try to like advance the data.
Well, one of the reasons that I reached out to you was I had started following you, and I'm seeing the graphics and so forth, and then one day I looked and I was like, wait a minute. How does she not have more subscribers than this? So, all that to say, folks, subscribe to the newsletter, subscribe to the Black Dollar Index, and if you can, throw some coins her way. And while you're at it, throw some my way too. I mean, because, I'm actually, there's an article that I've been working on for a while, and it's not so much, well, it is kind of a black white thing in a way, but you look at these platforms and you see people like yourself, and you're providing a service, and I think it's valuable. But what I have seen is that I was talking to my wife about this earlier. I think subscribers get kind of starstruck, and they'll pay. Oh, some of the names that we know that have joined Substack recently. I don't have to name
Yeah.
them,
Yep.
but they will throw money at those guys that are already millionaires. They don't need your money. Those of us that are trying to, do this work, you and your way, me, and looking at markets and making commentary, that I would like to think is somewhat unique in that there are not a lot of black people doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
And there's certainly, I mean, yeah, you've got Bloomberg, you've got all these other things from my
They're
point
not
of
focused
view,
on
but
us.
that stuff is not focused on us. And if you want to read it, it ain't cheap. you
Yep.
know so I think we have to recondition people. And this is the art. I'm really trying to write an article that doesn't get me in a world of trouble, but I don't think I can have the conversation without naming some names. Not so much that I'm, sour grapes that they're making money and I'm not, but I think it's more along the lines of getting our subscribers to recognize our value in
Yeah.
the way that they will. You don't think anything about paying so and so $50 a year, and they don't
Yeah.
need it. They have the infrastructure already. And so, my goal in connecting with people like you and some of the other folks I've done live events with is the good thing about platforms like this, and none of them are perfect, just like none of the corporations are perfect. It's a way, it is such a low bar to entry for us to be able to do this, whereas even 5 years ago, this we couldn't do this.
Yeah. Yep.
So, hopefully I'm highlighting people and helping. It works both ways. It's
I
helping me
I
too.
appreciate that.
No, do not get me wrong. It's helping me too, and it's adding to the credibility, I think,
It's shared
of both.
value. And
Yeah.
and that's what it should be. That's what every relationship should be, even with us in corporations, shared value. So I really
Hmm.
appreciate how you're using your platform. And honestly, I sometimes think that people don't think about it. Like maybe they think about it for some of the bigger people that get
Hmm.
thrown at them, but like specifically for Black Dollar Index, I realized there's no face. Like they don't
I had to
have no
ask, who is this? Will you come
like
on my live? And by the way, who are you?
I know. You're like, what? But I think they think that there's like just this machine that is like doing it, and like even if they don't like it or engage, it's still gonna happen. And that's just not the reality. The reality is, hey guys, it's a person behind it who's doing the research, like who's prepping the articles, who's writing the articles. Like there's man, I'm not, and I'm sure you're not doing this either, just running shit through sorry person.
One of these days, I am going to release a photo of my operation, my newsroom, and it's scary.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
I'll wait until I make it, until I start making money at this
this is
first.
the way it's going. Like even
Yeah.
those bigger names have resorted to Substack to go more independent, like and build their own things. And you've seen it even with like Roland Martin on YouTube. And
Hmm.
so this is like the future, and this is probably the way we're going to get more of the truth in this climate. Is to step away from these big media companies and like really talk to the people who are like on the ground digging
Yep.
in, like taking some bigger risks because we don't have the advertisers or any of the things, but we're really make the world better and raise the awareness and the consciousness of people.
That's right. And, we have more, I think, more of a direct relationship with our subscribers. as opposed to, a person on television. They don't know who's looking.
Right, right.
They know, they get the Nielsen numbers, but they don't. I mean, if somebody posts
They
on
don't know on
Twitter, yeah,
on
they. I
island
mean,
and on
folks can really and do, occasionally criticize me, but for the most part, I've been doing this so long, I have sort of um, found my people, and they have found me. Um, but it's hard work because in the meantime, I got to make a living and pay my bills and do all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
But this is what I love doing. You know,
Well, I think it's gonna pay off. It's not comfortable, but I think we do have to get uncomfortable and like, or we can go back to, doing the work that is not going to move the needle. And now is not the time to
it
back
is not. It
this.
really is not.
And I think we have to make some sacrifices, and that's what I'm doing. And I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I surely couldn't
Oh,
see.
let me tell you. I mean, at my age, I'm totally ruined for going to work for somebody else. There's no way.
I'm
There's
like,
no
I
way
don't
now.
like I don't know where I fit into this, and I don't think that I would be doing myself a service to take the gift that I've been given and go do something that is I don't know, more like just frivolous. Like I don't know. When I worked in entertainment, I had to find some of the silver linings in the work that I was doing to say, oh, well, you make people laugh. You make people happy by promoting this show. People love this show. But it wasn't feeding my soul. So that's where I
Well,
am. You
I'm
know?
I'm glad you're here. So you keep at it, and I'm certainly going to do the same. And folks, hopefully this was illuminating. I know it was for me. And if you're not already, subscribe to the Black Dollar Index, um,
Yeah.
and check out the information. And until next time.
Yep. And wait, I'm curious, Edward Holmes,
Yes.
like DM me or something. You'll find that many subscribers do as much research as you. I would love to hear more about it because
Really, where are those people?
we can all be sharing the data. Like as long as it's right, let's get it out there.
That's it. Like I say, in God we trust. Everybody else bring data.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna write that one down. Well, thank you for your time.
Okay, Kelly, my pleasure. And folks, I will see you on the other side. Take care.
Bye.